Jen Shah is back in the Bravo conversation. But the biggest question is no longer whether she can make headlines. It is whether there is any real path back to the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, after prison, after the friendships that unraveled both on camera and off. 4 months after her release from federal prison, Shah says only one castmate stayed truly consistent. One major unresolved issue still needs a direct conversation, and a return to the show is something she is not closing the door on. Subscribe, like, and share to support Starline Daily for more celebrity updates and trending entertainment news. On March 30th, 2021, Jen Shah was arrested in connection with a nationwide telemarketing fraud case that federal authorities said targeted vulnerable people, including older adults. At the time, she was one of the breakout personalities on The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, a franchise built on sharp friendships, sudden betrayals, and luxury-fueled drama. But what had been reality TV chaos quickly turned into something far more serious. The legal case changed the course of her public life, her family life, and the way her castmates would eventually talk about her. In July 2022, just before trial, Shah pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud in connection with telemarketing. Federal prosecutors said she had participated in a scheme that harmed victims across the country. Then, on January 6, 2003, a judge sentenced her to 78 months in prison. That sentence formally ended any illusion that this would be treated like ordinary reality TV controversy. This was no longer about reunion arguments or social media feuds. It was about criminal accountability, restitution, and the collapse of a public image that had once been built around being larger than life. Shah began serving that sentence in February 2023 at Federal Prison Camp Bryan in Texas. She would remain there for nearly 3 years before her release in December 2025. According to later reporting tied to Bureau of Prisons information, she served 33 months before being transferred into community confinement, with the remainder of her sentence being completed under home-based restrictions after a halfway house orientation. That detail matters because it explains where this current chapter begins, not with a complete legal reset and not with a triumphant television comeback, but with Shah still under supervision and still financially obligated to make restitution payments. Now, in her first detailed post-prison comments about the Salt Lake City cast, Shah says the social fallout is still very real. The one person she describes as steady through the ordeal is Meredith Marks. Shah says Meredith and her husband stayed in touch with Coach Sharif Shah while Jen was away, and she frames that loyalty as something she has not forgotten. In the universe of Housewives, where alliances change quickly and old arguments can linger for years, that is a meaningful update. It suggests that if there is any bridge still standing from the original group dynamic, Meredith may be the one on the other side of it. Shah also says she privately reached out to Mary Cosby after the death of Mary's son, Robert Jr. She says she sent a card and wanted to keep that gesture private and respectful. That part of the story is important because it shows Shah trying to step carefully into the lives of castmates she had not spoken to in years. Not for a filmed moment, not for public attention, but for a personal reason tied to grief. In a story so closely associated with scandal, that quieter detail changes the tone. It suggests she understands that not every contact has to become a performance. But beyond Meredith, the rest of the cast picture looks much more uncertain. Shah says she believes she could probably pick back up with Lisa Barlow, yet she does not describe an active friendship. And when it comes to Whitney Rose, Angie Katsanevas, and Heather Gay, she sounds hopeful rather than confident. She says she would hope they would be open to hearing from her. That is a very different thing from saying they are already back in her life. And this is where the Heather Gay piece becomes one of the most important parts of the story. During the Season 4 finale, Heather Gay said Jen Shah was the one who gave her the infamous black eye after a night out during the San Diego trip. That moment reshaped how many viewers looked back at Jen's final period on the show, because it suggested that the fear and pressure around her behavior inside the group may have run even deeper than fans realized at the time. Now Shah says she needs to speak with Heather directly about that claim. She even says that conversation is near the top of her list. But she also refers to it as the alleged black eye, which tells you that this issue is not resolved in her mind. So one of the most dramatic RHOSLC mysteries is still hanging over any possible reunion between these two women. There is also the question of what happened to the show while Shah was gone. Official Bravo cast announcements for Season 6 moved forward without her, naming Lisa Barlow, Mary Cosby, Heather Gay, Angie Katsanevas, Meredith Marks, Bronwyn Newport, Whitney Rose, and friend Brittany Bateman. In other words, the franchise did not pause and wait for Jen Shah. It rebuilt its ensemble, kept its conflicts moving, and found a new rhythm without her in the cast lineup. That is a crucial reality check for anyone talking about a return. Shah may still be one of the most talked about figures in RHOSLC history, but there is no public confirmation that Bravo is bringing her back, and the show has already proven it can continue without her. At the same time, Shah herself is not saying never. Asked whether she would return to RHOSLC, she says anything is possible and makes clear that she appreciates the platform the show gave her. That answer is careful. It is not an announcement, and it is not a negotiation made public. It is simply a refusal to shut the door, and from a reality TV perspective, that is enough to restart the speculation. Because for Bravo fans, never say never is exactly the kind of phrase that keeps a storyline alive long after someone leaves the cast. Still, Shah says her priority right now is not a camera crew. It is restitution. She says she has been paying while away and that she is required to continue paying a percentage of any future earnings. That is one of the most important parts of this entire update, because it moves the focus away from image repair and back to responsibility. Shah is not presenting herself as someone who simply wants a comeback. She is presenting herself as someone who says she has consequences to meet and victims to repay. Whether the public accepts that framing is another question, but that is the message she is putting forward. She also describes herself as more mindful, more humble, and more grounded by what she went through. Public figures say versions of that all the time after scandal. But what makes this moment different is the scale of what happened in between. Shah did not disappear for a few weeks of bad press. She pleaded guilty, was sentenced in federal court, served prison time, and returned to a fan base and cast history that still carries unresolved anger. That context makes every post-prison statement more significant, because viewers are not just judging whether she sounds sorry, they are judging whether they believe a real shift took place. And that is why this story is bigger than just a possible casting rumor. It sits at the intersection of accountability, celebrity reality television, and public forgiveness. Bravo audiences are used to seeing people come back after arguments, breakups, and even major scandals. But prison changes the conversation. A guilty plea changes the conversation. A court-ordered obligation to pay millions back changes the conversation. The question is not only whether Jen Shah wants to return. The question is whether the cast, the network, and the audience would see a return as growth, as unfinished drama, or as something they are simply not willing to revisit. For now, the clearest confirmed update is this. Jen Shah is home, still completing the final portion of her sentence, under supervision, saying Meredith Marks remained loyal, saying she wants to make victims whole through restitution, and saying she is not ruling out a future RHOSLC return. What has not been publicly confirmed is whether Bravo wants that, whether the audience would embrace it. That unresolved question is what keeps this story alive. Thanks for watching Starline Daily. As this situation continues to evolve, the next real turning point will not be a vague tease or an old rumor. It will be a confirmed decision, either a concrete Bravo move or a clear sign that Jen Shah's Housewives chapter is staying in the past.